The evening sky over Solera Hall was painted in shades of gold and silver. The great hall sparkled with light that came from 1,000 small glass lamps. Each table shone with polished wood, and every seat held someone important. People had come from faraway lands for one purpose: to bring peace between their kingdoms. Banners of different colors hung from the tall pillars, each telling a story of pride and struggle. It was meant to be the night of unity. At the center of the grand room stood Queen Ilara, a woman known for her calm voice and wise heart. She wore a gown of soft blue that moved like a river when she walked. Her eyes looked over the guests with warmth and patience. She had worked for years to make this night real. Her hope was that the gathering would end the long years of distrust between people who should have been friends. Beside her stood her son, Prince Kalen. He was 17, tall and full of restless energy. His hair was golden like his mother's crown, and his face still carried the signs of youth uncertain, proud, and curious about everything. This was the first time he had attended such an important event. Everyone watched him, waiting to see what kind of man the young prince would become. At the far end of the hall, among the group of human envoys, stood Commander Ethan Ward. He was a man of quiet presence. His uniform was neat but simple, and his eyes were sharp. He did not laugh loudly like some of the other guests, nor did he try to impress anyone. He simply stood and observed, speaking little and watching much. Many had heard stories about him, the man who had led his people to defend their lands during the toughest times. Yet when anyone spoke to him, he answered kindly, never boasting, never cruel. Prince Kalen noticed Ethan from across the hall. Something about the commander's calm made the prince feel uneasy. Maybe it was because Ethan did not seem to care about the royal titles, or maybe because his silence seemed stronger than most people's speeches.
No.
The young prince whispered something to one of the nobles near him. A few chuckles followed. Confidence grew in Kalen's chest like a spark waiting to catch. When Queen Ilara introduced the visiting group to her court, the time came for everyone to speak polite words. Ethan bowed his head with respect when his name was mentioned, but the young prince's curiosity turned playful. He looked straight at Ethan and said something meant to sound clever, a question that mocked the man's simple clothes and quiet nature. The words spread through the hall like a cold wind. The laughter that followed was soft but lasting, yet Ethan did not laugh. He did not show anger either. He simply met the prince's eyes. His look was steady and calm, without pride, without fear. Then, in front of the entire court, he turned and walked away. The room froze. Music stopped, and one could almost hear the flames flicker in the lamps. Queen Ilara's smile faded into silence. Nobles did not know what to do: stand in defense of their prince or stay still out of shock. Kalen himself looked startled, though he tried to hide it behind a strained grin. He had expected the man to argue, to lose his temper, maybe to apologize, but no one expected quiet dignity. Ethan walked toward the grand doors without a word. Steps were neither fast nor slow, simply steady. When the doors closed behind him, it was as if all the air in the hall had left with him. Queen Ilara turned to her son with an expression that carried both pain and disappointment. "Words can lift a heart," she said softly, "but they can also chain it. Never use them carelessly." The prince lowered his gaze. For the first time that night, he felt the full weight of being royal, not as an honor, but as a burden. The crowd slowly started to murmur again. Some whispered that Ethan had insulted the throne by walking out. Others said the prince had behaved like a child. The truth, as always, was quieter than both sides could admit. When the evening ended, Queen Ilara left the hall without another word. The musicians remained silent. The servants cleaned the tables in hushed voices. Prince Kalen went to his room, but no sleep came to him. The image of the human commander walking away replayed in his mind again and again. No one had ever dared to turn their back on him before. Yet the way Ethan had done it, without anger, without pride, felt like a lesson he had yet to understand. Outside, the night wind moved through the gardens. The banners no longer danced with joy, but drooped in silence. Peace had not broken that night, but something inside the young prince had begun to change. And far away, the man who had walked away did not realize that his calm silence had just set into motion the first step of a story that would shape two worlds. The next morning came with a heavy sky. It was quiet around the palace. The long halls that had been full of laughter and music the night before now felt cold and strange. Servants walked softly, careful not to make noise. News of what happened between the young prince and the human had spread fast. Everyone was talking about it in whispers. Queen Alara sat alone in her private chamber, looking out the tall glass window. She could see the gardens below, where the flowers still opened as if nothing had changed. But inside the palace, everything had changed. Her eyes were tired, though she had not cried. She was a queen, and queens did not cry where others could see. Still, her heart was heavy with worry, not for the treaty, but for her son. Prince Kalen had not come to breakfast. He stayed in his room, pretending to read old books, but he could not focus on any word. His thoughts kept returning to the man who had walked away. In his mind, he replayed that moment again, and again the steady stare, the calm silence, the sound of the heavy doors closing. Each time he thought of it, a strange feeling grew inside him. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something new, something that made his chest feel tight and his mind restless. When the queen finally sent for him, Kalen walked slowly down the long corridor. The crown guards opened the door for him, and he stepped into his mother's chamber. She sat by the window, her hands resting on her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned to him. "Do you understand what you did last night?" she asked. Her voice was calm but firm. Kalen looked down. "I only made a joke," he murmured. He could not even take that. The queen sighed. "A ruler's words are not jokes, my son. They carry weight, even when you do not mean them to. That man represents his people, the same people we wish to befriend. And you wounded his honor before all of them." Kalen frowned. He could have answered me, but he just walked away, as if my words were nothing. The queen's eyes softened. Perhaps they were nothing to him, or perhaps they were everything. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. Her words stayed with him long after he left her chamber. He went for a walk through the gardens, trying to clear his head. The air smelled of wet earth after a night of light rain. He sat by the fountain, watching ripples move across the water. For the first time, he wondered what kind of life the human commander led. What had made him so calm, so sure that he could turn his back on royalty itself? What gave a man that much control? Far beyond the palace, in the city below. People were also talking about the event at Solera Hall. Some said the human commander had been rude. Others said the prince had been foolish. In the markets and inns, everyone had their own version of the story. They called it the Night of Silence. By evening, the queen's advisors gathered for a meeting. They argued about what should be done. Some wanted to demand an apology from the human delegation. Others advised punishing the prince's tutors for failing to teach him proper conduct. But Queen Alara said very little. She only listened. When the discussion ended, she gave one quiet order. No one was to send a message of blame. The matter was to rest for now. That night, while the queen met with her closest aide, Prince Kalen slipped out from the palace. He wore a plain dark coat, hoping no one would recognize him. He walked through the lower streets where the lights were dim and voices were low. He did not know where he was going, only that he needed to breathe the same air as the people his words had insulted. He saw children playing with simple wooden toys, laughing without fear of royalty or rank. He saw merchants closing their shops, smiling even after a long day's work. No one knew who he was. For the first time in his life, the prince watched people live without titles, without crowns. And he began to understand that being royal meant nothing if he did not also understand the value of others. When he returned to the palace close to dawn, he felt different. His mother was waiting for him. She did not ask where he had gone. She only looked into his face and saw the change in his eyes. "You will have to face him one day," she said quietly. "Not as a prince, but as a man." Kalen nodded. He knew she was right. He also knew that before he could meet Ethan Ward again, he had to learn the meaning of respect. Not the kind taught in lessons and books, but the kind that comes from humility and truth.
Ow.
As he lay in bed that night, the image of the man walking away appeared again in his thoughts. But this time, it did not sting like before.
God.
It inspired something new in him, a wish to earn, not demand, the same strength that silence carried. And while the city slept, the young prince dreamed not of power or glory, but of understanding what real honor meant. Days turned into weeks, and the palace slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The great hall was once again filled with meetings and music, and the servants worked with quiet smiles. Yet underneath the smooth surface of peace, everyone knew that something had changed. The name Ethan Ward still carried a weight inside those golden walls. The young prince's smile had grown gentler. The light that used to shine in his proud eyes was now mixed with thought and a little sadness. Prince Kalen had become quieter since that night. He followed his duties, attended his studies, and walked beside his mother during gatherings, but his mind often wandered. Sometimes when no one was around, he would go to the library and read about past leaders, trying to find stories of people who had turned pride into wisdom. He wished to understand what gave some people the power to forgive and others the strength to stay calm. Queen Alara noticed her son's change. She did not scold him anymore. She simply allowed silence to shape him, just as the wind shapes the mountains. She knew that some lessons can never be forced. They must be reached with patience and time. One morning, a messenger arrived at the palace. He carried a letter from the northern outposts, where the human defense fleets were stationed. The letter came from a commander representing the Human Council. It informed the Queen that Commander Ethan Ward had chosen to serve at Meridian Outpost, far across the mountain range. He had refused any further political meetings after the incident at Solara Hall. The Queen read the letter quietly, then folded it and placed it on her desk. Prince Kalen happened to walk in at that moment and saw his mother deep in thought. "Is there troubling news?" he asked with concern. She looked at him for a long moment. "No trouble," she said softly, "but an opportunity, perhaps." She rose and handed him the letter. "You said once that you wanted to make things right. This might be your chance. Go to Meridian Outpost, meet Commander Ward in person and speak to him again, not as a prince giving orders, but as a man ready to listen." Kalen's heart beat fast. The idea of facing the man again sent a strange mix of fear and hope through him. "He might refuse to see me," Kalen said quietly. "Then let your patience earn his time," replied Queen Alara. "Real peace is never built through comfort. It is built through courage." The next morning, the young prince left the safety of the palace for the long journey through the mountains. He traveled lightly, taking only a cloak, simple food, and a small company for safety. They crossed narrow paths and cold valleys. During the journey, he chose to ride alongside his guards rather than in front of them. He spoke kindly to them, listened to their stories, and even shared his food around the campfire. It was during this journey that the prince began to feel less like a royal and more like one of his people. After several days, they reached Meridian Outpost, a stronghold built of iron and stone, surrounded by green hills. From a distance, it looked like a solid wall of strength. Human soldiers trained in the yards, their movements sharp and disciplined, were building machines, repairing ships, and watching the sky for signs of trouble. There was no gold, no music, no ornaments, only focus and hard work. When Kalen entered, the soldiers looked up with surprise. They were not used to seeing a prince among them. He dismounted quietly and asked to see Commander Ward. For a long time, the guards hesitated, unsure if they should disturb their leader with such a visitor. But when they finally told Ethan about the young prince's arrival, the commander agreed to meet him. Ethan stood by a window in his small office when Kalen entered. The room was simpler: desk, a few books, a map, and a kettle for tea. The prince looked around, feeling how honest and plain it all was. No golden chairs, no shining walls, no servants rushing to please anyone. It reminded him of the world outside the palace. Ethan turned. His expression was calm, just as before. "Prince Kalen," he said in a level voice. "You have traveled far. I came to speak with you," Kalen began, his tone respectful but uncertain. "I came to make right what I had done wrong." The commander nodded slightly. "Words can try," he said, "but actions prove." Kalen stepped forward, not as a prince, but as a young man seeking to learn. "Then let me stay here," he said. "Let me work beside your people. I wish to understand the strength that silence carries." Ethan studied him for a long time, then simply said, "Very well, you may stay. But here no one bows. Everyone earns what they keep." Kalen nodded, relief and determination shining in his eyes. He did not ask for comfort. He asked only for a chance. That night, as he lay in a small bunk beside the soldiers, he looked at the stars through the small window. The same stars that once made him feel proud now made him feel humble. And for the first time in his life, he was ready to listen, learn, and prove that he could grow beyond the shadow of his crown. The days at Meridian Outpost were long and full of work. The air smelled of metal, oil, and dust. Every morning, the loud sound of the training horns woke the camp before the first light touched the hills. Soldiers hurried to their posts, engineers checked engines, and guards prepared for patrols. Prince Kalen woke up with them each morning, no longer treated as a prince, but as one of the workers. His room was small, his clothes plain, and his hands that had once held books now carried tools. At first, many soldiers whispered about him. Some looked at him with doubt. They could not believe that a young royal would truly work among them. But the prince said little. He cleaned metal parts, lifted boxes, repaired cables, and listened carefully when taught about the machines that powered the defense lines. Ethan Ward watched quietly from a distance. He gave no special orders to help or to test the prince. He allowed the boy to find his own speed and his own strength. A week passed, then another. The prince's hands grew rough and marked with cuts. His body ached from long hours and sore muscles, but he did not complain. When others laughed and rested, he stayed behind to learn more. He began to see the rhythm of human life not as something lower than royal life, but as something powerful and pure. These people worked hard not for crowns, but for something greater: duty, family, and hope. One evening, when the sun began to set behind the hills, painting the sky orange and red, Ethan found the prince still at the repair yard. The boy was fixing a small transport machine, his face covered in dust and sweat. Ethan stopped beside him and said, "You are not required to work after supper." Kalen looked up and smiled faintly. "I know, but I want to finish this. It is almost working." Ethan folded his arms. "What will your mother say when she learns you have been fixing machines instead of speaking in courts?" Kalen wiped his hands on a cloth and answered softly, "She told me to find understanding, not comfort. I think I am finding it here." Ethan nodded but said nothing more. He simply watched as the young prince tightened the last bolts, checked the fuel lines, and started the small engine. It came to life with a smooth hum. The sound was soft but steady, like the first honest sign of progress. Kalen's face lit up with real joy, a joy that came not from applause but from effort. That night at the mess hall, Kalen sat with the soldiers instead of apart. They offered him bread and soup, and this time no one whispered. They spoke to him freely, telling stories of home, of family, of long days and dreams of peace. He listened closely, laughing with them. For once, he did not feel out of place. He felt part of something true. Ethan saw all this from the far end of the hall. He understood that the boy who had once insulted him was gone. In his place stood someone learning what it meant to lead with heart. After the meal, Ethan called him to his office. "You have worked hard," the commander said. "You have earned my respect." Kalen felt surprise and gratitude. "It means much to me, but I am still learning." Ethan poured him a cup of warm tea. "Learning never ends," he said. "Even for those older than you. You asked once why I walked away that night. Do you still wish to know?" Kalen nodded quietly. "I walked away," said Ethan, "because anger only feeds pride. Silence can make others see their own reflection. I hoped you would see yours." Kalen's eyes lowered. "And I did," he whispered. "It took me time, but I understand now. You taught me something that no tutor ever could." Ethan smiled slightly. Then my silence was not wasted. They drank their tea in quiet peace. No titles mattered there. No walls of rank stood between them, only two men. One older, one younger, both changed by respect. The next morning, news arrived from the capital. Queen Alara had called for her son's return. The peace talks were ready to begin again, and she wanted him beside her. Ethan met Kalen before he left. "Remember what you learned here," he said. "Respect is not shown by medals or bows. It is shown by how you treat others when no one is watching." Kalen nodded firmly. "I will remember, and I will use what you taught me." As his transport lifted off and carried him back toward the palace, he watched the outpost grow smaller behind him. He thought of the men working, laughing, building, and protecting each other. He thought of Ethan's calm voice and the lessons learned through silence. He knew this journey had not only changed how others saw him, but how he saw himself. The boy who had mocked a man of honor was gone. In his place, a young man returned, one who understood that real strength lives not in rank or power, but in patience, fairness, and humility. The palace looked different when Prince Kalen returned. The tall gates, the shining floors, the soft lights in the hallways all looked the same as before, yet everything felt new to him. He had left as a proud boy who thought titles made him strong, but he had returned with a calm heart and eyes that had learned to see beyond gold and rank. The air inside the palace no longer made him feel important. It made him feel responsible. Queen Alara met him at the grand entrance. When she looked at her son, she saw the change before he said a single word. His clothes were simple, his posture steady, and his face had that quiet strength she had once seen in the human commander. The queen smiled slightly. "You have walked far, my son," she said. "I see more in your eyes now than pride. I see understanding." Kalen bowed his head, not out of duty but respect. "I went to learn, mother, and I found teachers in places I never expected." The queen reached out and touched his shoulder gently. "Then your journey was worth it." That evening, the palace prepared again for a new Concord gathering between nations. Guests arrived from distant lands, each hoping for peace and cooperation. The great hall that once witnessed silence now shone with renewed warmth. Music played softly, and the long tables were filled with candles and flowers. Everyone waited to see if this time the meeting would succeed. When Commander Ethan Ward entered the hall, all turned to look. He walked with the same calm confidence as before, though his eyes showed a quiet surprise at being welcomed again. Queen Alara stepped forward with grace and greeted him. "Thank you for coming, Commander," she said. Ethan bowed slightly. "I come in peace, Your Majesty." And then, before the hall, Prince Kalen stepped forward. The murmur of the guests fell away. The prince moved toward Ethan, not with a proud walk, but with one of humility. He stopped only a few steps away and said in a clear voice, "Commander Ward, I once spoke without thought and harmed what my mother built with years of patience. I offended your honor and the dignity of your people. For that, I ask forgiveness not as a prince, but as a man who now understands his mistake." A heavy silence followed. Every person in the hall waited for Ethan's reply. The commander studied the prince for a long moment. There was no anger in his face, only a faint smile that carried a trace of respect. "Prince Kalen," he said, "forgiveness is already yours. You have shown more courage in speaking truth than many who hide behind their crowns. The past is finished. Let us look ahead." The queen's eyes softened with quiet pride. The guests began to nod and whisper approval. The tension that had once kept the two sides apart slowly lifted like fog after sunrise. Laughter came easily again, and the sound of kindness filled the hall where silence had once ruled. Throughout the evening, Ethan and Kalen spoke at length. The prince told stories of the soldiers at Meridian Outpost, of their long hours, their hard work, and their strong spirits. He spoke of lessons learned not from books, but from honest lives. Ethan listened with interest and gave advice on leadership and patience. He told the young prince, "Power is like fire. It can warm or burn, depending on how gently you hold it." The night ended not with arguments or pride, but with unity. Written agreements were made, hands were shaken, and hearts were lighter. Queen Alara looked around and saw hope settling into the faces of all present. For years, she had dreamed of peace built on true understanding, not false applause. Now, it was taking form before her eyes. Later, when the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, Queen Alara and her son walked together through the quiet garden. The moon shone bright over the flowers and fountains. The sound of water was soft and calming. "You have changed," she said softly. "What did you find out there, beyond our walls?" Kalen smiled, looking up at the stars. "I found what silence can teach. I found that respect cannot be ordered, it must be earned. I found that a leader who listens can do more than one who only speaks." The queen placed her hand over his. "Then you are ready to lead one day. Not as I feared a king with pride in his crown, but as a man with strength in his heart." He nodded. "I hope to be worthy of that. Far beyond the palace, in the camps at Meridian Outpost." Ethan Ward stood by the same window where he had once watched the young prince struggle. He smiled to himself, knowing the boy had grown into a man who understood the language of respect. His silent walk that night had planted a seed, and now it had bloomed into peace between two worlds of people. In the years that followed, the story of that night became a lesson told in schools and homes across the kingdoms. It was said that a prince once offended a man of honor, and the man answered not with anger, but with silence, so strong it changed hearts. And at the heart of that lesson was a truth that everyone could understand sometimes. The greatest wisdom speaks when words do not,